Okay, just to answer these questions then. Right, let's look. First question. So question 1, we're going to create a string called name that takes an input using the relevant J option pane. So relevant J option pane, would this be input dialog? So we're going to make a string, call it name, that takes the J option pane from a show input dialog. Right, then we're going to create a boolean called val initial. And we're going to set it to false. Right, then we need to assign the initial letter of the name to a variable called initial letter. So to get whatever we're putting in here, we're going to be sending a string in. So we need to get the first letter of that, and to do that we're going to use char at, and so we can use char to get that value. So it goes to a thing called initial letter. And it's just the 0th letter. Okay. Then we use a switch case to set val initial to true if initial letter is a vowel. Alright, so our switch case is going to be switch. And we need to look at initial letter. And we do our cases. So if it's an A, we then need to set vowel initial to true. Oh man, we're using Charles, so that should be like that. Now the nice thing with the switch case is we don't only have to leave it like that, or ask it about that, we can also put a whole lot of them. So doing this, and then putting another case, where we once again do our val initial, make it true. We can do that. It's not the end of the world, and remember we must put a break after each one. But what we can do is say if it's A or B, and doing this will then allow it to check either one of those. So let's just, that should be A, E, I, O, U. And then just to make sure that it catches all of them, now remember we can highlight everything, and we do that, which will just copy everything, and we can change these just to lowercase. If that doesn't happen, we then default to just break. Alright, so that'll then set everything there. Right, then we're going to print a label and values of name, val initial, and initial letter to the console. So we basically just need to print all of these things to the console, and so that's going to be to do that so it looks neat. So we got val initial, an init letter. Okay. Right, let's see what happens. So it's going to bring up our name. We'll just put my name, Kurt. Cool. So we get Kurt. The initial letter is K, and it's false. If we do another one, let's check with Andy. Oh, Anfi. And so we get A, and in it is true. Okay, so that part works. Cool. Then we move on to question 2. So for question 2, we need to use a scanner class and ask the user to enter their age. Right, so that's our main. So this is where question 2 starts. And let's just put here question 1 so we know where it is. Right, so question 2, the first thing we need to do was use a scanner class to ask the enter to enter their name. So let's do, we need our scanner. I'm just going to call it scan is equal to new scanner. And we're going to use system.in to get the value from the console. Then we're going to print out something just to say, how old are you? And then we're going to actually get the value from the scanner. To a variable called age. Alright, so we go to our scanner and we get next. Now we can do this. We can also take in the age as an integer. Because it has to be an integer, we can do that, and so we can call age and do scan.nextInt. Right, so I'm going to take that because it should be an integer, and so we'll do that. We're then going to then we declare a boolean variable called adult. And assign it false. Right. Use an if to set adult to true if the user is older than 12. So notice it says they're older than, so basically we're doing if adult is greater than 12. We don't need to do greater than equal to, doesn't really matter there. Age. And then we're going to do adult is equal to true. Okay, if the person is not a child, in other words, if they're an adult, use a while loop and a variable called count to print their name to the console with a space between each letter. Alright, so if adult is true, so we're going to say if adult, now remember, because this is set to true, adult is set to true, we just need to do that. We don't need to do equals equals true. Doing this is the same thing because it returns the same result. Okay. If that is true, we're going to use a while loop and a variable called count. So basically all that this is doing is making a unnecessarily large, or unnecessarily complicated for loop, but we're going to use a while loop and it's going to print the name with a space between each letter. So we're going to then say count is less than name.length, so that's going to get the length of the name, so that's going to allow us to then print each value. You can do SOP name.char@, and we're going to use count to keep track of that, count ++. Alright, just to make sure it prints everything, let's see what's happening quickly. First we have to import our scanner. Right, so let's see, put our name in. I'm just going to put in name of mine just so we've got a few values in there. And we're going to say we are 15 because we want it to print the values. And cool, it prints the names out like that. Now, let's just see what the question asked for. The question said with a space between each letter. Alright, so we need to then get rid of the LN because that's going to put a new line there. And we then want to put in plus a space. Let's see what happens. So put in a name and say 15, and so that then does what it's supposed to do. Right, next one. If the user is a child or their name starts with a vowel, use a for loop to print the name out vertically. Alright, so now we're looking at two things. We first want to see if the user is a child, and so basically that means we're going to go adults equals false, or their name starts with a vowel. So we want to check both this and or vowel in it is equal to true. We want to use that in a for loop to print their name out vertically, so we're going to say for int I less than name.length, and then just system.print with name.char at I. Okay, so let's test that one quickly. We need them to be either a vowel or an adult. No, not being an adult, so I'll just use my name and say that I am 10, and it prints Kurt. Next thing we need to check then is, it's again if their name starts with a vowel, so we can use Andy again and say that Andy is 18, and so it should print out like that, and print Andy downwards. Now see here that A comes out there, so maybe what we should do after the while loop here is just put basically just a blank thing just to end that, and we can test that again and see what happens. So we now get Andy, and Andy is 15, so now it prints name there and name there. Alright, so that one's done. Last one, if the user is a child and their name does not begin with a vowel, print their name in uppercase. So basically doing the same thing here, just what we're doing is if adult equals false. Now, although I used it previously there, we don't have to do this. What we can also do is just put an exclamation mark in front of it, thus changing. So if adult is false, it'll turn it to a true, so that'll allow us to enter there. So it's the same as doing that, where adult equals false, that little thing will return a true. This will do the same. And the next thing is the name does not begin with a vowel, so we also then want to see if, and just note here it's and so that'll be and vowel initial. Once again, we're just going to do this check there. So if the name does begin with a vowel, that'll be true. That negates that to true. And so that should work then. Let's check. And we need to print their name as an uppercase. So let's just do string upper name is equal to name dot to uppercase. And then we just need to print that. Right, remember we can also just do this in one step where we go, instead of doing upper name, we just do name dot to uppercase. It'll do the same thing as those two lines. I'm just using that as an example. Alright, so let's check what the parameters were for that question and make sure that this works. So if the user is a child and their name does not begin with a vowel, so we want something like Kurt being 10, prints it out as a vowel there. Okay. except we shouldn't. Well, let's just double check that. If the user child name starts with a vowel, user for you can put their name automatically. Does not begin with a vowel. Child, all their name starts with a vowel. Oh, okay, yes. So because that's an or and that's an and, that then works out. So that's then the working code. Cool.